And the Brent Thomas case is well, right now, the main case that, to me, is causing me to ask a lot of questions with regards to our systems. Who do we believe in? What is proper procedure? Because it has gone so far and it has branched off now into sub-issues because the Minister of National Security, he had his press conference where he said there are friends to criminals in different cases or situations, and he, including the judiciary, of which the judge of the case now, given the fact that the press conference is about the Brent Thomas case, while he did say that there are even friends to criminals in Parliament, the judge has taken umbrage to that. Then there are a whole host of other questions.
Well, the judge took umbrage to him saying that they're friends of criminals within the judiciary. That is
right. Yes. So he focused on that. But I think it's a catch-22 because the press conference technically was about the case. But even more to the case, not only are we finding out about some low-key special unit in the Ministry of Education that was involved in arranging the logistics and the flight, and I'm
National
not too
security.
Sure, right, I'm not too sure if they arranged the cooperation with the Barbadian police force. But then there's also just the case itself. Apparently, the government. It's not entirely clear. It could have been the lawyers for the state during the case more or less admitted that how he was apprehended was not necessarily correct. Meanwhile, the state is appealing. So on one hand, you have an investigation into whether or not the apprehension of Brent Thomas was either legal or above board or proper procedure. The commissioner is looking into that. The AG of Barbados is asking questions of his police. On the flip side, while that's going on, while to some extent the abduction is being questioned, we're appealing the case, or at least the state is. The state is appealing the case with regards to the stay of all criminal charges. On one hand, it makes sense because the minister is saying, well, look, we can't just return these items to him. On the other hand, they're basically saying, well, you can't hold us responsible for what the Bajan police did, to service our arrest warrants. It can't be constitutionally incorrect because they did it, we didn't do it. And I'm just like, I'm not entirely sure, but something about that just rubs me the wrong way, that you could basically use that excuse. Well, we gave it to them, and they, if they drop the ball, it's not our fault, so they can't hold us accountable. It's an arrest warrant from our jurisdiction.
Are we certain it's an arrest warrant from our jurisdiction? Can you say that for sure?
I believe he's a current judge. The then assistant DPP apparently advised with regards to the police on arresting, not necessarily the procedure to arrest, but whether or not they had a case to arrest. So it's not as though, I believe Roger Gaspard was answering some of these questions, it's not as though it's made clear what those details are, but it seems as though there was a reasonable case. Now, it could have still ended up that him being not guilty, but there was a reasonable case of him being
that's different because procedure is different to the actual reasonable argument being put forward. The actual procedure in which the arrest was conducted is a different argument. It's not surprising to me that the state is actually appealing the judgment. In fact, they're appealing it on 24 grounds, including the judge, the Honorable Justice Devendra Prasad, breaching the separation of powers, as well as aid on the aspect of Barbados and the Royal Barbados Police Force. But given what we've heard from the Minister of National Security, which was very little to very few, and given what we've heard from the Prime Minister, suggesting that he was not aware of the situation, in fact, he's seeking clarification from the Commissioner of Police, I'm not entirely surprised at all. In fact, I would have been more surprised if the state decided not to appeal the judgment. But the state actually appealing it is nothing more to argue on, or nothing more to comment on. We're hearing opinions being touted in the public by the former Minister of National Security. We're hearing opinions being touted in the public by one attorney at law, one very well-known attorney at law, Umlala, and that is in one of the daily newspapers. But you're also hearing what media are quoting as experts who are decided to remain they want to remain anonymous. But they're suggesting that the entire procedure was wrong. Timothy Hamel-Smith is saying that it's actually is unprecedented and it's a security concern for all citizens involved. The arguments of the case, well, today actually Devendra Rampersad was supposed to lay judgment with regards to the compensation for Brent Thomas. But last week, Friday, just after 11 p.m., the state actually filed its appeals on 24 grounds. So he invited the Minister of National Security to appear before him. He invited the Law Association of Trinidad and Tobago to appear before him as well. So this process, this case is going to go on for quite some time. I think you would be aware that the Prime Minister was in Barbados this weekend. The Prime Minister took some vacation time, has nothing to do with the case, although he gave clarification. One might argue the timing is rather weird, the timing is rather off, but the man works, he's entitled to a vacation just like everybody else. It's just peculiar given the timing.
The irony of it is, I do believe Mia Motley is the Minister of National Security for Barbados as well. She holds both that and the Prime Ministerial portfolio, correct?
If I'm not entirely sure, I can't say at the top of my head.
Well, my point is, she hasn't. I haven't heard anything from her. She's left it to her AG, as far as I'm aware.
Which I would think is the right thing to do.
Right, but in the case of the Prime Minister, to some extent, I actually would to some extent like to hear from him. Although I do wonder if it's because he's the Prime Minister, or if it's because way back when in a different situation, he touted the fact that he's the head of the National Security Council, so he has the right to be involved. And then, I actually agree with you. I'm just saying that it's quite convenient, unfortunately, based on the context of his past statements, not based on what it should be. It's quite convenient that, well, I'm not going to really speak about this, and I didn't know, and I would like to have some answers, and I'd like to catch up. And in a perfect world where you don't butt in using your hat as head of National Security Council on a different significant matter, we ain't talking about nothing minor. You can't wear it when the mood suits you. So now, again, the question goes, to what extent? Because the implications, we don't have the details, but the implications, we're using an RSS plane, but we're not a member of the RSS.
You have to understand that it's up to the Commissioner of Police to comment and actually give clarification as per the actions of her officers involved, as well as where the orders came from. Why is it crucial? And I think a caller last week is, if I'm not mistaken in this particular case, when I was saying that the Prime Minister should have been aware, he says by that logic, the Prime Minister should be aware of every single raid that takes place by the police service, which is absolute poppycock and nonsense to even suggest. In an instance like this, it was in a foreign jurisdiction. Furthermore, the big mistake here, right, is when Stuart Young said in Parliament that it was an RSS aircraft. That is a mistake. That's valuable information for the public, but it's a mistake on his part and on the part of the government, because now we have an understanding that's an RSS plane. According to some anonymous sources, and this is the thing, I'm always very peculiar when you speak about anonymous sources. You don't know who is actually giving this information and the validity of it. But what the individual is suggesting is that because Trinidad and Tobago is not a signatory of the RSS, this is not something that the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service can actually organize. This is something that should have gone through the Ministry of National Security, and by extension, the request would also go through to the Prime Minister because he is head of the National Security Council. So because Stuart Young made that confirmation in Parliament, it already blows open the perception where the Prime Minister says, I was not aware, he's seeking clarification from the Commissioner of Police. To me, that's nonsensical. That is unfortunate, and it goes to show that how the Prime Minister is trying to make an argument, at least in this instance. I'm not calling him out for the case, I'm calling him out on the awareness.
Yes, exactly.
On his awareness. That is what I'm calling out for.
So this is where a lack of appreciation of proper procedure and kind of doing things sometimes with string and duct tape, proverbially, rhetorically, right, could get you in trouble. Because again, what is the portfolio of Minister Young? I understand that unofficially he is Mr. Fix-It, right? You send him into a situation to hopefully fix it, and usually that works. The problem is, he made the statement, he had no ability to follow through or follow up with the statement, so it leaves the situation hanging, right? Now we have more questions after that statement. But also, he's the Minister of Energy and Minister in the office of the Prime Minister. So under what basis is he aware of what's going on with a national security concern? And yet, the line minister, or the Prime Minister in this case, is unaware. Or is national security concern somehow under the purview of the Minister of Energy unofficially, and what we don't know is that there are two shadow ministers of national security. We just didn't realize that there's one on the government bench.
Sean, what you said there is key in understanding this entire thing. Whenever you see a photo of meetings, I think the most recent photo was with the former Speaker of the House, Nazim Baksh, Nazim Baksh, with regards to repatriating citizens from Syria or ISIS, what do you call this? These areas of where they're concentrated camps, my apologies. We saw at that National Security Council meeting, who were the individuals that sat there? The Prime Minister, of course, as head. You saw the Minister of National Security. You saw the Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs.
Right, of course.
And you saw the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
AKA the Minister of Everything.
So Stuart Young is there. So if Stuart Young is aware of this operation, it's being brought to light, and he could actually respond in Parliament and say, listen, it wasn't a national security airplane or aircraft, it was an RSS aircraft. Then again, it blows open everything. He's aware of it. That is a crucial part of understanding it. So unless there's some secret operation taking place and the Prime Minister isn't aware of it, then he needs to question and vet all his ministers. Because if this is true that the Prime Minister was unaware, it's very bad for his image. And whatever reputation remains within the public view, it's very distasteful as well.
The wider implications, we need to, for the case to unfold, it's important to citizens to know, A, am I going to just be randomly abducted somewhere when there's an arrest warrant out for me using wrong procedure? Like this whole case, the irony is it could be thrown out because of a technicality. It could also, the appeal of the government is based on a technicality. But the wider question, I guess, that I have ultimately is with regards to, is it that Minister Hines is more or less a placeholder? He's a front man. Because the former Minister of National Security did not necessarily care to officially hold the post any longer. So they said, well, okay, fine. We'll trot out Hines out there. He'll be in front. And then, Stuart, you will still have to keep an eye on situations because in a cabinet of, I don't know, almost the entire government bench is a minister in some capacity or other. You know, there are only so many that we actually trust to get anything done. But then the flip side is, to what extent is this country being operated because we have an unofficial vice prime minister that's to some extent doing the job. Maybe he's doing the job of the Minister of National Security, and we just don't know. Maybe to some extent he's doing the job of the Prime Minister, and we just don't know.
See, my other concern as well for this entire case is that you're hearing about the $1 billion that has been spent for legal fees across the years, and how attorneys have benefited. The money that the state has had to pay out because of successful appeals from those who were defendants in cases prior to this one of Brent Thomas. Those are major concerns as well. But I think it is rather disturbing what is taking place. It is also rather disturbing that given the arguments put forward, and as a citizen, you feel absolutely nervous.
Are you speaking about how he reported he was treated for the approximate 24 hours to get him in custody from Barbados to Trinidad?
I think it's also disturbing, Sean, that if you are in a foreign jurisdiction, such as that from Barbados, and we're not entirely clear as per the procedure, because according to Omlala, commercial aircrafts are usually used in such operations, not even national security aircraft. But this was an RSS aircraft, so who put in that request? I have a lot of questions for the Royal Barbados Police Force. And I hope the Attorney General of Barbados is a bit more clear and a bit more open than what we've been privy to thus far.
We haven't even gotten the fact that this is an arms dealer for the state. Part of his defense is basically saying, well, yes, but these grenades were bought to sell to the state, right? So the irony, of course, is returning it to him. I don't know what he would do with them, given the fact that his primary legal buyer, is trying to prosecute him for bringing in things that he wants to sell to them, right? This is not a multiple suspected for multiple murder drug lord that we're bringing in here. This is somebody who technically does work for the state that this is being done to. So of course, if you can't talk about it because it's before the courts, we are left to ask, to what extent is this political fallout from the Gary Griffith, FUL, whatever else you want to lump into that situation? Because they said, well, they got the suspicion off of one firearm that was used in a crime that had illegal records with regards to being purchased from him, etc., etc. So they did an audit on his whole business. What does that mean exactly? Because they haven't actually told us to what extent, outside the fact that he had guns that he's supposedly not supposed to have, grenades he's not supposed to have, except that he has a license from the commissioner for the guns. And
you see, the thing is, I'm not going to sound as though
he's a dealer for the state.
I'm not going to sound as though I'm a defense attorney for Mr. Thomas, and I'm also not going to sound as though I'm a defense attorney for the state. What I know is what has been given to the public thus far. But there are a lot of things that we do not know. And I don't want to allude to anything else, and I don't want to give the impression that, it's victimization, or it's a deal gone wrong, or he made somebody unhappy or whatnot. No. To me, I am only hoping that even because we've been aware of certain things thus far, as this case continues, I hope we are made more aware. I hope we get more information, because I'm not going to pass judgment right now, then, right here. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know every single thing. But what I do know is that on the basis of it, it is very peculiar, rather strange, and absolutely scary as to what can happen, exactly what can happen, and maybe even how certain entities or certain organizations operate.
No, all I do know is that you could be doing business for the government and they could still come after you off of that business. That's the scary part. That's the part that doesn't make sense, and that's the part where we need more answers.